Okay, so good morning to everyone. Welcome, or good afternoon, whatever time it is by you. Welcome to Bava Kamma, and this is a new Masechet. Today's daf is sponsored by Caroline Ben Ari in honor of her birthday, which falls today according to the Hebrew date, and on Shabbat according to the civil date. I will remind everybody this is technically the daf for Shabbat, just so you know. The daf for Friday is the last daf of Kiddushin, which Bezrat Hashem we're going to learn together on Sunday. So you're all invited to the Siyum. You can still register. You can register to the last minute. It's just a Zoom registration link. You register, you immediately get your link, and you can then join the Zoom. We're looking forward to seeing you there. We have a great program, and hopefully, looking forward to finishing Seder Nashim and Masechet Kiddushin at the Siyum. We're going to get started now with Bava Kamma. So a few words of introduction. First of all, please recommended to listen to Dr. Ayelet Hoffman-Libson's introduction to the Masechet, and read Gita Neufeld's introduction to the Masechet as well. One is audio, one is reading. They're both excellent overviews of the Masechet and also really of Seder Nezikin in general, which we're starting. So basically, we're going to, just to give you some background. Originally, Bava Kamma, Bava Metzia, Bava Batra were all one long Masechet called Seder or Masechet Nezikin, it was called. Okay, like we have Seder Nezikin, this was called Masechet Nezikin. It was 30 chapters long. It was very long. Probably that's why they decided to split it up. And it's also split up by topics. Okay, it's a little bit more topical. If you want to listen to Ayelet Shiur, she'll give you the lowdown on the differences between the Masechtot, even though, there's a mix of things within each one, but they are divided somewhat by categories. By the way, the same thing seemed to have happened with Sanhedrin and Makot, which is the one that come right after Seder Nezikin, which also seemed to have been one longer Masechet and then split up into two. We'll get to that when we get to Makot, and you're going to see that it kind of continues where Sanhedrin left off. What's Bava? Bava is gate. Okay, so it's the first gate. Bava Kamma. Kamma means first, like Tana Kamma is the first Tana. Metzia means middle, Emtza in Hebrew. And Batra is the last. So we have the first, the middle, and the last gate, which is basically the gates of damages. The main topic here is damages that we're going to start with damages that one's property or things that come from a person, but not directly damage. And within that, we're going to get into damages that a person causes. But the main damages of humans are going to be more at the end of the Masechet. Okay, we will get the end of the second chapter, beginning of the third, into Adamu Ad Olam, a very famous line, which is people are always responsible for their actions. I've talked about this many times, how Nezikin is all about your actions. It doesn't matter what you were thinking, what you were intending. It really matters what your actions were. Okay, and that's the main focus of really the entire Masechet, is that we're accountable for our actions, whether we intended them or not. But if they affect other people, then it becomes a big problem. Then we're going to move on to the two topics at the end of the Masechet are theft. Okay, if you steal, cause damage by stealing. And the other category is by hurting another human being, by hitting them, attacking them, as opposed to, let's say, damaging property. Okay, which is more in the beginning of the Masechet. What else? Okay, what I wanted to talk about before we start is really what's unique about Seder Nezikin and how it's different from, for all those who basically started learning at the beginning of the cycle. We've been through brachot, which has its own kind of nature about davening, about prayer, about our relationship with God, about blessings. Then we moved into Moed, which are all the holidays, which are Jewish holidays, really. Then we went into Nashim, which is all about relationship between husband and wife and all sorts of, complications that come from that, whether it's, Yevamot and all of that. We got a little sidetracked with some others, Nazir, Nidarim. But all of those really are, yes, we were able to view them outside of the Jewish world, but for the most part, they have a lot of unique, like a wedding. It's true, people get married in other religions, but the details are very different, right? Like there's a certain way that it's done the Jewish way, which is kind of has its own unique nature to it. Interesting about Nezikin, and I recommend that you go back to if you didn't, or maybe even if you did, but if you were at the Siyum HaShas or heard the Shiurim from the Siyum HaShas on our website, you can go to the Siyum HaShas page and you can see the Shiurim that there were. And Rabbanit spoke then about Seder Nezikin and what's unique about Seder Nezikin. And what she said was something I've always thought about. She just expressed it very, very beautifully, about that Seder Nezikin is really, there's something unique about it, because on the one hand, it's technically it's something that exists in the world at large. It's not something particularly Jewish, right? On the other hand, it's what the rabbis had to say about values, right? This is all about ben adam lamakom, me and our fellow human beings, and what, how we have to act in a world, and how we have to interact with each other, and how we have to be careful that we don't damage someone else. And I always loved teaching these sugyot when I taught in high school, because in high school it was always fun to act out things and make it relevant. So while we're talking about things, that are not as like certain things you can't really view in the world outside of halacha, these are things that you can totally understand from just having knowledge about the world. Like what's our responsibility? What happens if, so there's practicality of things. Let's say learning about the holidays is very practical. This is very practical in the sense of this comes up all the time, right? First of all, in Bava Batra, we're going to get to neighbor relationships and what's fair, what's not fair. What if you try to encroach on my boundary and all that? How do I show rights that this land is my land? Then we have, all the sorts of things. If, I borrow your car and then it damages them. So of course the Gemara doesn't talk about cars, but all of this really can be found in our Masechet. And it's very interesting to think about in that kind of a way. So I recommend you go back and listen to Rabbanit Shiur. It's in Hebrew, but there's subtitles in English. So you should be able to follow along if your Hebrew's not as good. And a few other words of introduction. We have bookmarks. So here's an example of our bookmarks for Bava Kamma, also sponsored by Caroline, whose birthday is today. So basically there's bookmarks with the checklist in the back. If you don't have them yet, first of all, there's a PDF on today's daf post, and you can order still. So we open the registration again. So if people want to order, if you didn't yet order, you can get them. They're free of charge. We have a suggested donation, but they're free of charge. Okay, and we will mail them to you. The mail system is not the most amazing, but hopefully it will get to you at some point. It's for all of Seder Nezikin. So basically you're going to end up with, even if it gets there a little bit late, you'll have them for the next while, because we'll be in Seder Nezikin for a while. Okay, I think that's enough introduction. We're now going to get started with, there was some other connection that I thought about, which was, we talk about the order of Seder Nashim and why it's in the order that it is. And theoretically, you should have started with Kiddushin. So one of the reasons I think to end with Kiddushin is because Kiddushin is a bit of a lead-in to Nezikin, because Nezikin has a lot to do with ownership, and I own something and I'm responsible for it. And if you remember, the whole beginning of Seder Kiddushin was all about kinyanim, about how you acquire things. And that was really a lead-in to once you acquire things, right, then you're responsible for them. So it could be that that's another connection in terms of the order of the Masechta. So with that, we're going to get started. But before we get started, it's important, I want you to look at the study guide if you have it, and if not, just listen or open in Safari, or if you have a Tanakh in front of you. We're going to open to the Psukim in the Torah, because the best way to get started is to really understand what the Torah has to say about it, and then we're going to see, okay, we can spend a whole Shiur on this, which we're not going to do because it's a Daf Yomi Shiur, but looking at the verses in the Torah and seeing what is ambiguous about them, what is mentioned here. And I particularly want to start also because we're going to start with the first line in a minute, which says, maybe we'll just start for a minute with that, which is Arba'a Avot Nizikin. There's 4 main categories of damages. Before we even get there, I'll just say, first of all, it starts with a number. This is very common in Mishnayot. Probably one of the main reasons why they number things is because they used to memorize them. And it's easier to memorize when right? You go to the store and you want to remember that you have 4 things to buy and you're too lazy to write it down. So you just remember, okay, I have 4 things, and then you'll remember the 4 things in your head. So it's a good way to remember. So they gave things numbers. Okay. Avot are main categories. Where else have we seen avot? Well, 2 main places, and we're going to get to them in our daf today. One is Shabbat, has avot malacha. Those are the 39 malachot that you can't do. They're called av malacha. And from them, there's toladot, right? There's subcategories. This is like the main category, and then there's subcategories. And by tum'ah, by impurity, we have the avatuma. Remember, an avatuma is like a person who became impure to a dead person, a person who touched a dead sheretz, right, a creature. Those things are avot tum'ah, and they can be mitame, right? The next level is a rishon l'tum'ah, right? There's certain laws about what can be mitame what. We'll get back to that later, so I don't want to waste our time with that now. Those are other places where we see this term. And the Gemara is going to relate to that and say, wait a minute, we have a vote here, we have a vote there. To which is it more similar? What are these 4 avot nizikin? And the reason why I wanted to say this before we read the Psukim is because I want you to see that the order in the verses of the Torah, the Mishnah follows the order of the verses in the Torah, and that's probably why it's written in this order. Shol, habol, hamaveh, v'hahevel. Okay, an ox, right, your animals that you possess that cause damage, a boar, a pit, cistern or something, that, you dig something in the middle of the street. Okay, we're going to learn it's only in the middle of the street, because if it's in your own property and somebody falls into it, well, that's their fault. What are they doing trespassing on your property? Maveh, okay, maveh, we're going to see is a big machloket. Is it that an animal goes and eats in someone else's field, or is it a person? Okay, how they get to those two options, we're going to get there, not today. And hevel. Hevel is a fire. Okay, when you set fire and then a wind comes and blows the fire into someone else's field, you're responsible for that as well. So now let's look in the Psukim. Shemot chapter 21, verse 28. Ki yigach, I want you to look at the language. When an ox gores, okay, the language is yigach. Et isho et isha, okay, a man or a woman, and he dies, okay, they kill the person who made. Sakol yisakel ashur, the shore gets stoned. We talked about that, the shore and niskal, not too long ago in Kiddushin. You can't benefit from it, and bala shor naki. And the owner is not liable at all. Okay, this is interesting, okay, other than he loses his shul. Well, why is that? Well, the next pasuk says, well, im shor nagachu mitmol shel shom, but if it was a dangerous ox, now most oxen don't gore people and kill them. So therefore, it was totally unexpected damage. This is what we call a shor tam. We're going to get to. The next pasuk says, but wait, if he already did this a few times, and hu abba and they warned the owner, and lo yishmerenu, and then he didn't watch the shore, you have a crazy ox who's nuts, goes and kills people. Well, then, if he kills someone, then sakol yisakel and gamba alav yumat. Then it goes to the other extreme. Forget about naki, you're supposed to get killed. Now, the next pasuk says, but wait a minute. Im kofer yushat alav. Now, you didn't really kill the person. You just weren't careful about your animal, and your animal killed the person. So we're not going to actually kill you, okay? When the Torah says we're going to kill you, it seems like the Torah is saying you should get the death penalty because you really caused the death of another human being. But since it was indirect, we'll give you an out. What's the way out? Well, im kofer yushat alav and atam pidyon nafsho kachol sheyushat alav. Well, if you pay your way out, then you can redeem your soul from death as they put upon you. Okay, this is very unclear. We're going to have a whole discussion about how we evaluate how much money you're supposed to pay your way out, to, basically pay the ransom so that you don't get killed. Okay, then there's another pasuk. We're going to ignore that right now. Okay, then there's a law if your ox gores a slave, because a slave had a different value, because a slave was your possession. We're talking about Canaanite slaves that we've been talking about all along. For that, the Torah gives a set value. Okay, this is one of the few places, right? We learned it by the rape, someone who rapes, someone who seduces. There's a set price in the Torah. There's a few places where there's a set price. This is one of them. It's 30 shkalim. As opposed to the first one, it sort of depended on, well, we don't know yet, but kasher yushat alav, however, what they put upon you, we don't know yet what that means, but it's going to change. It's fluctuating price. This is a set price. It's always 30 shkalim. Then, so that's shor. We haven't finished shor yet, because this is only if a shor kills someone. We're going to get back to what if a shor just damages. Get back to that soon. Next, we have v'chiv tach ishbol or ki yichre ishbol v'lo yichasenu v'nafal shama shor chamor. Okay, if somebody digs a pit in the ground and he doesn't cover it, and somebody dies, right? Here they say it's an animal dies. Okay, and the first we were talking about if a shor kills a person. Now we're talking about if your boar killed an animal. Baal habol yishalem kesef yashiv lebalav v'amei yellow. Okay, so in simple terms, the owner of the boar has to pay. Okay, this what the mei yellow. We're not going to get into all these details right now. Next, now we go back to a shul. Okay, lamed hey ki gof shul isha shul ve'ehu. Now notice the language changed here. First it said ki gach, which is to gore. Now it says ki gof, which we're going to have to see what exactly this means. It also seems to mean to gore. It's just using a different word. In this time, he gores another ox and causes your ox to die. Okay, someone else's ox to die. So what do? He only pays, according to the pasuk, I'm not going to read the whole thing, he pays half damages. Why does he pay half damages? Well, this is because he's a shor tam who caused damage, and shor tam again means we didn't expect this. It's not something that's common. Well, again, common, somewhat common, but not common enough that we're going to make you responsible for full damages. But notice it reverts back to nagach. We're going to get back to this soon. Started with ki gof, and that pasuk, the next pasuk says, well, if you turns out he was a shor who was known to have gored in the past, and lo yishmerenu balav, and his owners didn't watch him, then he has to basically pay full damages. This is the laws of a shor mu'ad, one that was already done it 3 times. That's what the Gemara is going to learn. It doesn't say 3 times in the Torah, but they're going to say 3 times now already. You're fully responsible. Then, so we have shul, we have bol, we get back to shur. We had shur that killed a person, now shur that killed another animal. Now in Shmot Perek Kaf Bet, we're going to get to, on Pasuk Dalet and Hey, we're going to get to maveh and hav'el, at least maveh according to one interpretation. Ki hav'el ish sadeh o keren, v'shilach et bi'iro u'bi'er l'steh achel. So it's unclear exactly what this means, but what it seems to mean is, if you go into your friend's field and your animals graze and eat there, that would be shen. Then meitav sadeh u'meitav karmo yishalem. We get another halacha here, which is you have to pay from the best of your land. You might remember we talked about ziburit, benonit, and idit, that there's different values of land. For example, right, a ketubah, the woman only gets from the ziburit, right, from the poor land. A baal chov, if you owe money, it's the benonit. If you damage, since you caused damage and you're, the one who started the whole thing, we're going to make you pay from the best of your land. It's a way to disincentivize damage also. So now we get to the fourth one. When a fire goes out, and it eats up somebody's field, right? So you have to pay. So that's where they get to these four categories. Again, that assumes maveh is shen, the teeth of an animal, as opposed to, right, the eating, as opposed to the other interpretation we'll get to, which is it's actually a person causing damages. So now let's go back to our Mishna. That's our intro. Now we're going to start living. So these are the four general categories. Lo harei hashul karei maveh, v'lo harei maveh karei hashul. The Mishnah says something very unclear, which is, well, the characteristics of the damages of having your shore damage are not the same as maveh. Okay, first of all, it depends what maveh is, and the Mishnah doesn't tell us how they're different. Okay, this has certain characteristics, and this has other characteristics. Okay, so the shore is not like the maveh, and the maveh is not like the shore. Each one has something unique that the other one doesn't have, but they don't tell us what this is. We're gonna have to wait a little while till we get back to that. Not in today's time. Below zevizeh, now they're going to be much more specific though. Lo zevizeh, the shore and the maveh are different from the others. They're not. Lo zevizeh sheyesh behem ruach chayim. Okay, now a shore and a maveh, whether you say maveh is adam or you say it's an animal, they both have, it's something that's alive, a living being, right, who's causing the damage. Sharei ha'esh she'ein bo ruach chayim. They're keharei ha'esh. They're not like the fire, and also not like bor. Okay, if I dig a pit, right, neither of those have ruach chayim. Those are inanimate objects, right? My bor that I dug damages you, or my fire. Now the fire is a little different than a bor, because a bor is stationary and a fire moves. We're going to get to that in a minute. Right now they're just comparing the different categories. So it's interesting that the Mishnah does mention the differences here, whereas it didn't highlight what the differences are in the previous sentence. V'lo zefizeh shedarkan le'lechu lahazik. Well, all three that we just mentioned, the shul, the maveh, and the fire, the esh, or hav'el, all of those are unique or different from a bor. Why? Because darkan le'lechu lahazik. They go out and damage. They move, and while they move, they're damaging. They're on the move. They're not like karei abol she'ein darko le'lechu lahazik, but a bor just sits there, doesn't get up and damage. Right? It's just sitting. Hatzada shavesh behen. What's the common denominator between all four of these things? Shedarkan lahazik. Well, they're all dangerous. Right? Whether your bor is moving or not, it doesn't matter. It's dangerous. Right? Nowadays, if they're doing work in the street, they always put up a big, they put up a sign and they put up a barrier around and say, open pit. Right? Be careful. With a big, warning sign on it. So these are things that generally damage. Okay, your animals go damage. Okay, now exactly where they fall on how expected is this damage is the whole question. That's why there's a difference between a short time and a short mu'ad, because even though they do damage things, some damage is more expected and some damage is less expected. But in general, all these things are dangerous, and shmiratan alecha, and you as the owner is responsible for them. Now again, owner might mean different things here, right? I don't own a fire. I don't own the pit that I put in the public domain, but I did do something that caused damage, and I'm responsible. If I dig a pit in the middle of the public domain, I'm responsible to put up a sign and put a barrier around it because it could damage. And if I have a fire, I'm responsible to put it out so it doesn't spread to somebody else's yard. And what else is unique about them? Now, first we were talking about the characteristics of it. They're all things that could damage, and therefore you're responsible to watch them. Well, also when it comes to the law about them, they're similar, and this we saw from the pasuk. That's why I mentioned it. The one who damaged is responsible to pay damages from the best of his land. So if he's paying in land, he has to take the best of his land. Again, this doesn't mean he has to pay more. It means that if I have, I have $1,000 worth of land, I could have $1,000 worth of poor land, which I'll have to pay them more poor land, or $1,000 worth of good land. It'll be a smaller piece of land, but better quality. So for damages, I have to pay the better quality. I can't just say, oh, let me give you the same value in my poor quality land. That's the Mishna. Now the Gemara is going to start off in something that often in beginning of Masechtot, we compare this to other Masechtot. It's very common that the first sugya of a Masechet is a comparison. It often quotes from different places. Not always, but we've seen it already a number of times. Here's a good example. So the first thing they say is Midikatane avot michlal dika toladot. Okay, they start with the second word. It says avot. That means there must be also toladot, which are subcategories. So if we have a main category, there must be subcategories. That's a reasonable assumption. So now the question becomes, and this is the question that we're going to deal with the whole daf. Toldotehen kayotze behem, olav kayotze behem. Are these toladot the same, or are they not the same? Meaning, do they have the same level of stringency? Meaning, are the laws going to be the same if an animal does one of the main categories, or if there's some subcategory, let's say of an ox goring, if there's a subcategory, are they going to be liable in the same way they're liable for the main category? So, yeah, I think I mentioned this, but there's a study guide for today, which I try to do like as much as I can, create a study guide that shows the structure of the sugya, sometimes with charts. So if I didn't mention it, I'm mentioning it now, you can get to it either from the details on the podcast. If you're using the podcast, you can just click on that, or you can also get to it from the website on today's daf post. And there's a link to it at the bottom. There's a button that you can then access the study guide. So I recommend using it as good review. It's in Hebrew, but you could still, it'll help you view the structure of the daf. And so will the charts. So now that's our basic question. We have categories, which assumes we have subcategories. Well, are the subcategories going to be treated the same as the main category? Now, what's motivating them to ask this question? Because they're going to give you two examples. One is Shabbat and one is impurity. And the way that subcategories work are different in the nature of them in Shabbat, are different than Tum'ah. So now we're going to see how this works. By Shabbat, there's a Mishna that says the following. Avot melachot arba'im chaser echad. Right? There's how many? 39 malachot. They call it 40 minus 1, but that really means 39. So they say avot michlal di'ika toladot. So once you have avot, it must mean there must be subcategories, right? We know there's 39 basic things you can't do on Shabbat, but there's way more than 39. And all the others basically fall into subcategories of those 39. So now they say the following. Toldotehen kayotze behem. So now they say the rule is there that the subcategory is like the main category. Okay, meaning what? Lo shna av chatat, v'lo shna tolada chatat. Lo shna av skila, v'lo shna tolada skila. There's two different punishments you get for Shabbat. Depends on whether you did it knowingly or not knowingly. If you knew you were doing a malacha and you didn't care and you did it anyway and someone warned you, you're going to get stoned. Okay, if they warn you before and say, you know, you're going to get stoned if you do this, and you say, I don't care, I'm doing it anyway, then you're going to get stoned. So, if you did an av malacha, one of the main 39 categories, like let's say planting, you're going to be liable. You're going to get stoned. If it was a subcategory of planting, then you're also going to get, right? It's something that's similar to planting. Okay, usually they say it's similar. Either the result is the same or the action is similar. Okay, whereas in order for it to be the av, it has to be the same action and the same result. For a toladah, it's got usually one or the other. And the point is, you're going to get punished the exact same way. If you did it not knowing it was Shabbat, let's say, or not knowing it was forbidden to do this on Shabbat, you're supposed to bring a sin offering, a sacrifice. Well, if you did a toladah, you're also going to have to bring that same chatat, okay, the same sin offering. So basically, they're the same thing. Well, now this is going to lead us to a separate question, okay? We've gotten to our main point so far, which is, we brought an example where there's avot and there's toladot, and the toladot are the same, as opposed to tumah, which we're going to see they're different. And then we're going to go back to our question, well, which one are the nizikin similar to? The subcategories of nizikin, are they more like Shabbat or are they more like impurity? But in the meantime, if toladot are treated the exact same way as the avot, then my ika ben av letoladah, then what's the difference? Why do we have these three main categories and subcategories if the subcategories are treated exactly the same as the main? Nafkamina, well, the relevance is the following. If you did two different avot at the same time. Okay, now this would only be if you did it unwillingly. If you did it on purpose, it doesn't make a difference because you're going to get one death penalty. You don't get 2 death penalties. But let's say I didn't know it was Shabbat and I started doing a bunch of different melachot. And then I find out it's Shabbat. And then it turns out, oh my goodness, I made a mistake. But I made what? Let's say I did all 39 melachot while I didn't realize it was Shabbat. Am I going to have to bring 39 sin offerings? Or would you say this was one mistake? I just didn't know it was Shabbat and I did all these things. So if you did 2 avot or 39 avot, you're going to have to bring a separate sacrifice on each one. But, and if I did 2 different toladot that connect with 2 different avot, okay, I did a toladah of planting and I did a toladah of writing, let's say, then I'm going to be liable for each one. Okay, same thing. But if I did an av malacha and I did a toladah of that av malacha, that's only going to be considered 1 sin offering. The maximum you could bring basically is 39 and only 1 per av. Okay, so that's therefore you're only going to be liable 1. That's the reason for the difference between avot and toladot. Well, we're going to have a problem with this though, because if you're Rabbi Eliezer, okay, well the Rabbi Eliezer says if I do an av and I do a toladah, subcategory of that same av, I actually have to bring 2 sin offerings. So according to him, we're going to have a question, which is, Amai kari le'av, Amai kari le'toladah. That answer only works according to one track. But according to Rabbi Eliezer's track, it doesn't work at all. So what's the answer? Why are there avot and why are there toladot? And according to this answer, there's really no practical relevance. Okay, but it's just that, the 39 malachot are 39 actions that were done while they were building the tabernacle. And that's where we got to these 39 categories. Therefore, they're more important because they were done in the temple, in the building of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. But all the others are just toladot. They come out of those 39 categories. So it's just how to categorize them. We're saying there's 39 that were done in the temple, in the building of the Mishkan. But all the toladot, things that come out of them, well, those are subcategories. They're the exact same thing as the main category. It's just that we're going to call those avot because they were actually done in the time when they built the Mishkan. And because of that, that's how we got to these, right? The 39 malachot are really learned from that. So they have a certain amount of importance, but again, no practical importance. It's just a semantic thing, or it's just a categorization thing. All the rest came from there. So that's why they came from there. They're derived from there. That's why we're going to call them toladot, because they're derived. But the halacha is exactly the same. That was a big aside we got off to about Shabbat. But all we really wanted to know was that avot are just like toladot, okay? In which case, in terms of severity, in terms of punishment, everybody agrees to that, even Rabbi Eliezer. It's just a matter of how many chataot you're going to have to bring if you do an av in its own toladah, but that's this whole separate thing. The main point is toldote and kayotze behem, as we say. Now we're going to move on to tumah. Kabei tum'otnan, avot tumah. Okay, these are main categories of tumah. This is the object that's tameh, that's impure, that passes on impurity to something else. Okay, the main avot are called the sheretz. Okay, a creepy crawly creature that's dead, a carcass of a dead animal. Shichvat zera, semen, and moving down to amubet, bit meit. And a person who came in contact with the dead body. The dead body itself is called avi avot tumah. But a person who came in contact with the dead body, okay, you went to a funeral, you were, you were walked over cemetery, by dead bodies, you're now going to be impure. Okay, how exactly? I'm not going to get into all that. Or you were in a house with a dead body, you're now a tamei. All those people, you might remember, they're called av hatum'ah. Now, what are the rules? Well, toldetehem lav kayotze behem. What comes out of them? Now, here it's a little bit different. It's not a subcategory. It's what becomes impure from them. Okay? Now, de'ilu av mitamei adam v'kelim. The rules are, we've learned this a number of times, but it's always good to review them, and it's the kind of thing that's a little complicated to get. So hopefully after many times of review, you'll get this, which is all these things, the sheretz, the shichvat zera, and the tamei, all of them pass on impurity to other people as well, and to vessels. Okay, so they can be matame a vessel. Let's say I touch a jug while I'm tamei. I make the jug a rishon. What's in the jug, let's say liquid, now becomes a sheni lituma. Okay, those are the rules. Now, tolada, the rishon, ochlinu mashkim matame, adam v'kelim lo matame. If that jug touches a person it's not going to make that person impure. The jug is already weaker, right? It's a lower level. This is what you see. The toldotehem are not like the avot. So whereas someone who came in contact with a dead body touches a jug, the jug can't go make another jug tameh. If the jug touches another jug, doesn't make it impure. Okay, so basically that's how it works. The av can be mitame, people, vessels, and by the way, food and drink. But anything that became tameh as a rishon can only be mitame, food and drink. That's it. So now you see an example of the opposite. So hachamai, what's by us? So now we brought these two examples, and now we want to know what's the law by these four categories of damages. Are what comes out of them, what's derived from them, the subcategories, are they the exact same thing? You're going to be liable in the exact same way as the main category or not? Well, we're going to have a long answer because we're only going to get to the answer at the end of this amud. So to get to this answer, well, we have an answer, but the answer is very unclear. I'm a Rav Papa. Here's our answer. Yesh mehem kayotze behem veyesh mehem lav kayotze behem. Papa says a very ambiguous answer. It's really an answer because he says some are and some are not, but he doesn't tell us which are which. So the Gemara is going to spend the rest of the daf figuring out which are the ones, where do you have a vote that the subcategories are treated in the same way and which ones are not going to be treated in the same way. So in order to understand this, we're going to go back and we're going to, or not back, but we're going to go to a braita. Tanu Rabbanit. Now this braita, if you compare it to our Mishna, sounds like it's parallel to our Mishna and actually talking about something different. So let's read this. Shlosha avot. Okay, we had arba avot nizikin. Now they say shlosha avot ne'emru b'shor. Now they're telling you that this category of shor is actually made up of three categories. Okay, there's three main categories within shor. Okay, it's like saying there's a subcategory, which is actually a main category. Okay, it's a little bit unclear if this is a different version than our Mishnah, and if the author of our Mishnah were talking in light of this braita, you would say shor, right? You would say keren, shen, regel, and then you would say bor and hevel. Now maveh could be shen. So our Mishnah maybe does have keren, that shor is, let's say, keren, okay, which is goring. And shen, which is tooth, is maveh. And then regel is added here. It's unclear how this works in with our Mishnah. It could be just a different Tanaitic source. But this is the main source our Gemara is going to start with, which is, here are three main categories within an ox. So we have, he gores someone, he eats, shen is eating. Okay, biting we're going to get to after, not to confuse it. Shen is teeth. Teeth means he eats someone's property. Okay, he eats like, he goes into your field and he eats your vegetables. And regel. Regel is he tramples on things, right? This is very common, as opposed to humans, where if I'm walking on the street, and we'll get to this later, but I'm responsible, right? This is the beginning of the third chapter. Okay, you leave your jug and I step on it. Actually, a big machloket about that, in which case I'm responsible. But basically, theoretically, I should be responsible to be looking where I'm walking and not walk in your cot, and trample on your jug. But an animal doesn't really look at what he's doing, right? They just walk wherever, they don't care. They just trample on everything. So that's kind of a common damage that an animal would cause, that it was pretty expected. Okay, so now we have three damages. We're going to talk about each of them, although we're really going to get to only keren today, and we'll get to shen and regel in the next class. So keren minala. The first one they want to do is let's take keren and let's understand it. Before we get to are the toldot kayotze behem, we have to understand what is keren. Where does it come from? How do we know that this is an av malacha? What we're going to see is that something is called an av malacha. I'm sorry, not malacha, an av of nizikin. Something is called an av, a main category, if it's written in the Torah. And then you know it's a main category. So here we have keren shen regel, keren minama. Where do we get keren from? So first source in the Torah. Well, pretty simple. Tanu Rabbanit. Okay, here we have a braita. This braita is what we call a midrash halakha. The Mishnah tells us there's four categories of damages, and that's all they tell us. They don't tell us where we get it from the Torah. A midrash halakha is from the same time period of the Mishnah, but what they do is they start with the pasuk. And they say, how are we deriving halacha from a pasuk? So instead of categorizing things or making things organized, they more do it in the order of the verse. The verse says this, what does this mean? So, ki yigach, that was our first pasuk. A shor gores. Now, how does a shor gore someone? With their horns. So, ein nigicha ela bekeren. Goring is obviously with the horns. That's how you get keren, which is an ox goring with their horns. Shen emal, as it says. Now, how do we know this? Well, they're going to quote a pasuk in Sefer Melachim. Vayas lo tzikiya ben Knaana karnei barzel. This was a prophet. He made these horns that were made of of iron. Vayomer ko amar Hashem be'ele tenagachat aram. And he says, with these karnaim, you're going to attack Aram. Okay, so that's his prophecy. And what do you see here? Horns go with nigicha, because with these horns, you're going to lingoach et Aram. Ve'omer, second pasuk. Now the Gemara is going to say, why did you need 2 psukim? Every time they give 2 psukim to prove something, the question is always going to be, why do you need that second pasuk? You could have proved it from the first. And now, instead of a pasuk from the prophets, they're going to bring a pasuk from the Torah. From the end of Sefer Dvarim, when Moshe gives the blessings to the Jewish people, to the different tribes, this is what he says to Yosef. Bechol shoro hadar lo, v'karnei re'em karnav, behem amimi nagach. Okay, he's like the eldest of Ashur, will be his glory. Karnei re'em karnav, he has horns like a re'em, like the horns of an animal. Behem amimi nagach. With these, he will gore other nations. Okay, it's showing a sign of strength. Again, what do you see? Horns of an animal are used for goring. Okay, maveh omer. So again, we're now off on a tangent here. We want to understand what's the source for keren in the Torah. We learned it from ki yigach, but now just because it says ki yigach doesn't necessarily mean it's with horns. How do we know it's with horns? Well, we're now going to see from these 2 psukim, to which the Gemara says maveh omer. Maveh omer always means, why did you need to say ve'omer? And it says, meaning, why did you bring the second pasuk? So they answer, well, first they bring a possible answer, but they're going to say this doesn't really work. How do we know that they're going to do that? Because it says v'chitema. And if you want to say, which already is going to be, well, we can't say this. If you want to say divrei Torah, divrei Kabbalah lo yafinan, if you want to say, well, generally, we don't want to learn Torah law, like here we're trying to say this is an of Nezikin, this is a main category from the Torah, and how do we know keren? Because ki yigach is keren from the pasuk and the prophets, but maybe you would say you can't learn Torah law from the prophets, because in general, we learn Torah law from the Torah. We don't, right? Prophets aren't necessarily, you can't necessarily learn from psukim in the prophets for halacha. Well, tashma, it does, that's why we need the second pasuk, bechor shoro hadar lo. Now, this is all the intro to, if you're going to say this, that's why we need the second pasuk. It's not going to work. Why? V'hai melafu. This isn't a case where a Navi did something and we're going to say, let's learn halacha from what this Navi did. That I could see, okay, prophets, right? We're not supposed to learn Torah from prophets. Okay, prophets sometimes do things a one-off. We don't generally learn halacha from prophets, but we're not trying to learn halacha from this pasuk. What are we trying to do? We're just trying to prove language. We're trying to prove that here you see the word ki yigach goes with karnaim, right? With keren, with the horns. So that's not anything that you really can't learn from the prophets. So theoretically, you don't really need the second pasuk. That's not a good argument. So now we're going to have to give a different answer. It's not because it was in the prophets and we'd rather pick a Torah pasuk. The reason is, elamahu detema, you might have thought, he palig rachmana ben tam lemuad. Well, the Torah says ki yigach, and notice what the Torah says. There's a difference between a shor tam and a shor mu'ad. Remember, a shor who never did it before or hasn't yet done it 3 times. Again, the Torah didn't say 3 times, but we're going to learn that. To a shor that already did it 3 times. Now, maybe if you had just the pasuk about tzikiyah, notice the horns he's using. He took horns that were detached from the head of an animal, and he said, with these, you will gore the other nation. So you might think that when we talk about, and this is a bit of a weird thought, but when we say there's a difference between a shor tam and a shor mu'ad, now what's the whole idea of shor tam, shor mu'ad? We don't expect a shor to do this kind of action. Therefore, only if you did it 3 times, are we going to make you fully responsible, right? Maybe that's only when the horns are detached. Now, try to imagine a shor taking his detached horns and goring someone with them. It's a little bit strange. But what they're suggesting is that's a bit atypical. And that's why if we had the tzikiyah pasuk alone, you might think that there's a distinction between shor tam and shor mu'ad, and we'll be lenient with you and not make you liable when the shor is using detached horns to gore, because that's atypical. But when they're attached, maybe you would think, now it's logical to think this, it's just not logical to think that an ox would gore someone with the horns in his hands, right? He doesn't really have hands. It would be weird how we would do it exactly. But the theory is like this. If the shor is mu'ad, if the shor, has attached horns, maybe that's a typical way of doing damages. And therefore from day 1, right, the first time the ox gores, you should be responsible because that is expected damages. So if you just have that pasuk about the horns going with nigicha in that case where they're detached, you might have thought maybe this halacha is only, again, you'd obviously be responsible if they're attached, but maybe you'd be more responsible if they're attached in the way the pasuk says it, which means you'd be responsible even if it hasn't been done 3 times. You'd still have to pay, let's say, full damages or whatever the differences are. If you killed a person, that would all apply, only if they were detached, but not if they were attached. Tashma, b'chor shelo hadarlo, etc. That's why they brought the second pasuk, which shows a shor goring is called yigach while they're attached to his body. So in the end, that's why we need the second pasuk. The obvious question the Gemara doesn't ask is, why don't you just use that pasuk and not the second pasuk? So that's a better question, which they don't ask. Okay, first part we did so far. Let's just remember what we're here for. We want to know, are the toladot like the avot? And now we want to know, the answer is, well, some are, some aren't. And now we want to know, well, which ones are and which ones aren't. But we're not there yet at all. So all we did so far was we took a braita, 3 avot. We only started with the first one, keren, goring. And we proved so far, how do we know that keren is an av malacha? And the reason is because it says in the Torah yigach, and yigach is with the karnaim, with the horns of the animal. Toladad de keren mahi. What are the toladot of keren? So the answer, nigifa, nishicha, revitza, ubiita. 4 toladot. Okay, now we're finally getting to toladot, and then we're going to finally get to, eventually, the end of this section. Well, are these toladot just like the av or not? So let's go through the 4. Nigifa is if an animal pushes, not with their horns, but with their body. Pushes someone or pushes, knocks something over, breaks it. Nishicha, biting. Okay, not eating, but biting, like biting somebody. Rivitza, crouching. Now, right, imagine an ox crouches down, sits on something, breaks it. Bi'ita, or on a person, could be. Or bi'ita, kicking. Okay, so they damage in all 4 of these ways. That's a toladav keren, because what the animal's doing is using its force, right, to attack. Mishna nigicha dekari le'av. So now they're going to start with this list of the 4. Again, we're still not where we want to get yet, but we'll get there soon. So the first thing they're going to do is, okay, and you can see this on the sheet, we're going to ask questions about all different parts of this braita. So we're starting with the first one, nigifa. Well, mishna nigicha dekari le'av. Okay, keren is the main av, and that's nigicha. Why is that? We already proved that because it says, right, dichtiv ki yigach. It says ki yigach, and yigach is to gore. What do you gore with? Your horns. Nigifa nami ktiv, but wait. The word nigifa also appears in the Torah. Remember, I pointed that out to you. In Pasuk Lamed Hey, 35 of chapter 21, in Shmot, it says, ki yigof. So if it says ki yigof, when it talked about killing a person, it said ki yigach. When it talked about killing an animal, if your ox kills an animal, it said ki yigof. Now, ki yigof is to push, not to gore. So nigifa should be an av malacha because it's mentioned in the Torah as well. To which they answer, oh no, you misunderstood. Hi nigifa nigichahi. That nigifa in the Torah actually means nigicha, meaning it means to gore. It doesn't mean to push. Pushing is only a toladah. Okay, so now the obvious question, well, Titania, well, first of all, they're going to explain, how do we know nigifa is nigicha? Well, if you look at the next pasuk after that, it says, right, if an ox yigof, okay, another ox, and he dies, he pays only half damages because he's a short time. The next pasuk Lamed Vav says, "Oh no daki shor nagahu mitmal sham." But if it turns out he was a shor who gored already in the past, now it started with ki yigof, he pushed here, and then it says, well, if he was a shor mu'ad because he nagach, gored. So therefore, they say, right, how do we? So patach minigifa b'siyem minigicha. That pasuk started with nigifa. Then it used the language of nigicha. Why? Lomar lecha zohi nigifa zohi nigicha. Well, the reason why they switch that language is to teach you that when the Torah uses the term nigifa, it's not the same as when the rabbis use it. Okay, they wanted you to know nigifa and nigicha are one and the same, and that's why I use them interchangeably in those 2 psukim. But when the rabbis talk about nigifa, that's something else. That's pushing without using your horns. Whereas in the Torah, nigifa is using your horns. Okay, so that's why we explained that nigifa is not a separate av, because it's not really mentioned in the Torah, even though it looks like it is. Well, now we have to explain why they changed the language. Well, they wanted you to know ki yigof is a little less strong. They want to know that Adam de'ile mazala ktiv ki yigach. Behema de'ile mazala ktiv ki yigof. There's a difference between humans and animals. And when an animal kills a person, it's much harder to do that because an animal has mazal. A person has mazal. What is mazal? Okay, usually means luck. It doesn't really mean luck here. So Rashi says it means it's the opposite of luck. He knows to protect himself. Some people say mazal is an angel. He has an angel that protects him. And that's why it's harder. Either which way, it's harder to kill a person. Okay. And that's why it says ki yigach. And an animal, it's easier to kill. And that's why it's called ki yigof. Okay. It's interesting because you might say animals have better instincts to protect themselves because that's, they live in the wild and they're always protecting themselves from other animals. This sugya seems to say not. And okay, so what? I mean, what do we learn from this? Well, the Torah want to teach you something as an aside. This is very interesting. If you're a shore who already killed a few people, okay, or maybe damaged, okay, Rashi says killed. You should be a shore and iskal and dead, but let's say you haven't been killed yet. Well, you're not mu'ad for behemot. If you kill, I'm sorry, you are mu'ad for behemot. If you can kill people, then the assumption is you can kill animals. And therefore, if you killed an animal, you're going to be responsible. He's going to have to pay the owner full damages. It's not a shor mu'ad. But mu'ad lebehemah, if you're a shor mu'ad for a behemah, you've killed 3 animals, but you haven't ever killed a person, lo havi mu'ad ladam. We're not expecting that you're going to do damages to people. And if you kill a person, you're only in the shor tam category and not in the shor mu'ad category because it's much harder to kill a person than it is to kill another animal. That's what they say here. Okay, nishicha. Now we're continuing in the list. Nishicha tolada d'shen. Wait, why is nishicha if it's with your teeth? Why is it not under the category of teeth? Why is it under goring? No, shen yesh hana'ala zeka, ha'en hana'ala zeka. When you bite, you're not getting any benefit. When you're eating, you're getting benefit. That's a different kind of damage. The shore is eating your food, the neighbor's field because he just wants to eat. That's different than biting, right? We all know the difference. That biting has some sort of intent to damage. Rivitzau bita tolada de regel. He crouching and kicking sounds like regel from the leg, not from this. No, that's different. Regel has a kamatsui. Honey, and has a kamatsui. Regel, as I said, that's just him walking normally, and that kind of damage is expected. But keren damage is a little less expected, and that's why, right? We're going to say, well, kicking and crouching and causing damages is less expected from the animal, and therefore they're under keren. Okay, anyway, what's all this about? Well, remember, now we go back to our basic question. When he said the toladot not like the avot, what was he referring to? If he was referring to these, let's talk about the criteria of keren, the characteristics. They intend to damage, right? There's damage intent, not like they were just eating. It's your property, and shmirat alecha, you're supposed to be protecting from it. Hanenami, all 4 of these toladot are exactly the same. Same 3 characteristics. So therefore, ela tolada de keren ke keren. It must be the toladot of keren are like keren, and therefore, by process of elimination, ki ka'amar Rav Papa ashen v'regel. When Rav Papa said the toladot are not like the avot in some of them, he must have been talking about shen and regel, and that we'll save for the next class, which we will learn together on Sunday. Remind you, this is actually the Shabbat. So what we saw is the 4 main categories. Then we compared it to Shabbat and Tum'ah, where the main categories and the subcategories are equal in terms of severity. In Tum'ah, it's not the case. Which one here? Rav Papa said 1 yes, 1 no. And what we basically did was try to figure out that keren must be the one where it's the same, and therefore shen and regel must be the ones that are different. And we're going to get to that in the next class to see how we get it from shen and regel. How do we know that the toladot are different from the avot? Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Hoping for better news, and we will meet up again on Sunday.